I only intended to plant a few flowers in my garden to enjoy a bit of peace. But then Karen from the HOA decided to turn my yard into an archaeological dig site. Who would have thought that beneath the green lawn there could be an ancient relic? Have you ever had a neighbor who claims to be an archaeology expert and turns their yard into a giant pit? I have. Please comment below if you've ever encountered a controlling neighbor like Karen. And what would you do if your yard was turned into an excavation site? I still remember that bright summer morning when Daniel, was busily arranging new flower beds in my quiet garden. Warm rays of sunlight filtered through the leaves, mingling with the chirping of birds to create a marvelous natural scene, until the sound of an excavator roared like an approaching storm, tearing up the ground and shattering that tranquility. Neighbors began to gather along the sidewalk, sitting on folding chairs and even the flower stand of the house next door. Their eyes were filled with curiosity and caution, as if watching a play approaching its climax. Whispers floated down the street. Here she comes again. That huge hat. Looks like she's in an adventure movie. Wonder what she's digging up this time. And then, as if to satisfy those expectations, Karen, the self-proclaimed HOA archaeologist, appeared at the end of the street, strutting like a general leading an expedition. Atop her head was a dazzling beige wide-brimmed hat that shone in the sunlight like a bizarre crown. In one hand she held a notebook full of haphazard sketches, and in the other she raised a giant magnifying glass as if to proclaim, "I'm here to uncover the truth buried for centuries." As soon as she stepped into my yard, Karen immediately pointed and declared, "Right here, at this very spot. Based on my research, this place once housed an ancient civilization, maybe pre-Columbian, or at least from the colonial era." She lowered her voice, then turned to the crowd as if filming a TV show. "We must act immediately. If we delay, history will be forgotten forever." The neighbors couldn't hold back their laughter. An elderly man shouted, "Watch out, she might unearth a pharaoh's tomb, folks." A little girl live-streamed in a whisper, "Everyone, look, Karen's ranting again." This is episode 3. I stepped out from the house, my hands still dirty from tending to some lavender clumps. The scene before me nearly made me drop my shovel. My lush green lawn, once a peaceful paradise, was now being trampled by boots and marked with white chalk outlines. I stepped forward, trying to stay calm. "Karen, this is absurd. Please stop. This is my yard, not an archaeological movie set." Karen spun around sharply, her eyes filled with pity as if I were too foolish to understand the greatness of her discovery. "Do you have an archaeology degree, Daniel?" "No?" "Then I'll just self-declare it. And believe me, I once excavated at the Jenkins backyard and found a rusted nail from the industrial age." I glared at her, gripping my shovel tightly. "Well then, I have a gardening degree, and I see you're killing every inch of living soil here." Before I could finish, a construction crew suddenly marched in as if on command. Dressed in bright orange protective gear, they brought mini excavators, large shovels, and soil drills. Their leader turned to me coldly and asked, "Are you the homeowner?" "We have orders from the HOA for an emergency excavation." "Emergency for what?" "Only for emergencies," I snapped. But he turned away, ordering the team to start work. The roar of machines was like the growl of a monster. Patches of grass were uprooted, and clods of earth were heaved up and dumped down, echoing the pounding of my heart as I watched my beloved garden crumble. The neighborhood kids laughed. "Mr. Daniel, you're digging up treasure." "No, it's Karen occupying it." Another woman live-streamed and commented, "This is the third day in a row that Karen wrecks someone's yard because she thinks she's the HOA's version of Lara Croft. Don't take your eyes off her. Watch out for flying mud." I stood frozen in the yard, my chest tightening. Every scoop of the shovel felt like a hammer blow to my heart. I was not only facing ridicule from the crowd, but also Karen's arrogant stance, arms crossed, eyes watching every layer of soil being overturned as if waiting for a treasure or at least a broken vase. Then she turned to me with a sneer. "Don't worry, Daniel. When I'm done, the whole world will know this place as the cradle of history. And perhaps you should thank me." I clenched my fists and took a deep breath. "Thank you for trampling on my personal freedom?" She shrugged nonchalantly. "Sometimes history demands sacrifice, and a few flower beds are not too high a price." I nearly lost control, but instead of yelling, I just stood silently. Not because I was afraid, but because it felt as if I were caught in a mad, inescapable farce. A child called out, "Uncle, if you find a skeleton, can I take a selfie?" I swallowed hard. My garden, my world, was gradually disappearing. Amid the laughter, the roaring machinery, I knew this was no longer a private matter. This was a battle, and I would not let Karen win. Karen, with an exaggerated seriousness as if guarding a top-secret military zone, quickly erected a makeshift barrier with red plastic posts and glaring yellow caution tape. A large wooden sign was pulled out, scrawled with garbled letters, "Whole archaeological site. Danger. No entry without permission." Standing before the barrier, magnifying glass raised like a sword of conviction, she bellowed as if leading a rescue mission for a lost ancient civilization. "Listen up. This isn't just a lawn. It is evidence of a lost culture. We cannot let it be buried under ordinary dirt." The neighbors, now densely gathered outside, were half curious, half laughing. A young boy whistled. Last time, Karen found a beer can lid and said it was a prehistoric offering. A middle-aged woman holding her phone murmured during her live stream. Episode 4. Karen and the Temple of Trash. Standing a few meters away, trembling with my phone in hand as I dialed the police like a final lifeline, I hurriedly said when connected, "Yes, hello, I'm the homeowner, and there's a woman, a self-proclaimed archaeologist, illegally excavating my yard." But before I could finish, Karen was faster. She stepped forward and held up a thin stack of papers, clearly a document from the Hoe with red stamps and messy ink. "Don't you understand?" she said coldly, her eyes alight with triumph. "This is an authorized decision from the board. I'm only carrying out the orders. You should feel honored that your land was selected." I gripped my phone tighter, biting my lip to avoid saying anything that would worsen the situation. Inside, a silent wave roared. "Honored? When my peaceful garden has been turned into a war zone." Just then, from the depths of the pit where the crew was diligently digging, came a shout. "Stop the drill. There's something here." Everyone turned their eyes in that direction. One worker jumped down, bent over, and pulled up a long, thin object coated in thick black rust. Karen's eyes lit up as if she'd hit the jackpot. "Oh my gosh. An ancient irrigation system, I told you. This isn't modern plumbing. It's a water channel from the pre-colonial era." She clapped as if celebrating her own achievement. The crowd murmured, "That pipe? Oh please, it's obviously junk. Probably from the 1990s, ancient enough for you, apparently." But then, at that very fateful moment, the antique relic that Karen was extolling suddenly let out a loud "foo," like a bursting firecracker, and then shattered. A thick column of black water burst upward like a fire hose, gushing down in torrents like the furious rain of vengeful gods. Mud, water, roots, and rocks swept everything away, including the caution tape and even Karen's wide-brimmed hat. "Ahpa!" Karen's scream rang out, indistinguishable as to whether it was from panic or because mud had clung to her bright red lipstick. She desperately tried to use her soaked hat to scoop up the water, but only made the scene more farcical. One worker slipped and fell, dragging two others into the mire. I stood there, amid a chaos resembling an apocalyptic farce, unable to hold back my laughter. I chuckled softly at first, then louder, shaking my head in exasperation. "Wonderful. Thanks, Karen. for turning my yard into a free mud pool. Maybe I should start charging admission. A nearby neighbor, laughing uncontrollably, said, "Aaron, what kind of archaeologist turns into a rescue worker now?" A girl live streaming immediately shouted into her mic, "Oh my gosh, everyone, this is the most priceless moment of the year." Karen is diving into the mud in search of civilization. Soaked from head to toe, clinging to a shovel like a survivor of a flood, Karen still insisted loudly, "Don't you understand, Daniel? This is a relic. We must preserve it." Her voice trembled, choked by the crowd's laughter. The aura of the HOA archaeologist had become nothing more than a comical image in a puddle. A young man laughed heartily and patted my shoulder. "Daniel, please keep it as it is. Someday I'll bring a tour group and sell tickets for the excavation fail experience." Inside, I felt a mix of frustration, anger, and deep sorrow. Yet I couldn't deny a bitter satisfaction. In the end, the twisted truth that Karen tried to paint had collapsed on itself. And for the first time in hours of struggling against absurdity, I found myself smiling, because justice, even if delayed, knows how to make people laugh until they cry. The police arrived shortly after, followed by the HOA board, who, upon entering, nearly slipped in the mud. The atmosphere in the emergency meeting room was as cold as an operating room. Karen, her hands still soaked and her clothes splattered, sat facing 3 board members. Her expression was a mix of defensiveness and self-satisfaction. "I was just doing my job," she declared loudly. "And if you read the report I submitted, you'll see, according to my research, that pipe is the remains of an early urban irrigation system." One board member, half wearing his glasses and leaning back, replied coolly, "And you're saying that relic is the reason you demolished a resident's yard, leaving the whole block without water for nearly a day?" Karen's face stiffened. Another member flipped through the papers she had submitted and muttered, "Even the archaeological map you hand-drew has a unicorn?" In the corner of the room, I sat silently, watching Karen bow her head for the first time, avoiding eye contact. No more magnifying glass, no more wide-brimmed hat, no more historical proclamations, just a woman now facing the consequences of her own making. And I, for the first time during this crazy ordeal, felt as though I had won, without even having to lift my shovel. A board member, his voice cold and tinged with sarcasm, finally spoke. "But Karen, the relic you discovered turned out to be nothing more than an old, rusted pipe. Do you realize you've caused damage to someone's property? We are witnessing an excavation without any basis." A few chuckles erupted in the meeting, like needles pricking Karen's pride, causing her to lower her head slightly. Just a few hours after the archaeological disaster, the news spread at lightning speed. No need for mainstream media. The social networks did the job, and then some. A live stream clip showing Karen submerged in mud, her hair in disarray, and her wide-brimmed hat drifting like a sunken ship amid the sludge was shared tens of thousands of times in just one night. The most prominent sound in the clip was Karen's frantic scream mixed with the crowd's laughter and a young woman's loud exclamation over the phone, "Karen, you're officially the mud queen now." In the comments, the atmosphere was as lively as a fair. Suggest Netflix buy the rights immediately. Series, Karen and the Sewer Relic. Sorry, but I laughed so hard when she shouted, "Preserve," while the water reached her waist. This is why the HOA should have regular psychological evaluations. Within one night, the hashtag #MudQueenKaren trended. A TikTok account even remixed Karen's clip with Indiana Jones-style music and a slow-motion effect when the water hit her face. The clip reached 3 million views in 24 hours. Meanwhile, my phone kept buzzing. Message after message popped up. "Daniel, I've watched that clip 3 times and still can't stop laughing, but seriously, I feel for you. No one should endure that in their own yard. Karen needs to sit down and relearn the concept of personal boundaries. Next time you have an excavation project, Call me first so I can sell tickets. But not all messages were merely humorous. A close friend wrote bluntly, "You're too nice. You should sue her to show that just wearing a magnifying glass doesn't give you the right to ruin someone else's life." My emotions were a tangled mess: frustration, anger, sorrow, but I couldn't ignore a bitter sense of satisfaction. In the end, the twisted narrative that Karen tried to construct had collapsed. And for the first time after hours of battling absurdity, I truly smiled, because justice, though delayed, still managed to make people laugh until they cried. Soon after the archaeological disaster, after a flurry of complaints, lawsuits, and public outrage, the HOA board, who had once silently protected their archaeology warrior, was forced to act. An emergency meeting was held. In the official notice sent to all residents, the board admitted their mistake in blindly approving an activity with unclear legality and purpose. Karen, once the powerful HOA president, was immediately dismissed and banned from participating in any internal HOA activities for 10 years. Additionally, due to pressure from my lawyer and some other residents, the HOA was forced to compensate for the damages, including property loss, garden restoration costs, and a considerable amount for emotional distress. After that day, Karen never appeared in public again. But no one forgot her reaction during the disciplinary meeting. When she was informed of her dismissal, Karen abruptly stood up, her face bright red, pointing at each board member and shouting, "You are all killing the spirit of academia. I only wanted to preserve culture. This is betrayal. One day, you will regret not believing me." One member quietly replied, "We will regret it if one day a real ancient relic appears." With a wide-brimmed hat drifting next to it, Karen left the meeting room with heavy, soggy steps reminiscent of that fateful morning. She no longer held her head high, nor did she carry a magnifying glass or a history notebook. She was just a lonely woman, swept away by the very tide she had created. And from then on, whenever anyone mentioned the HOA excavation, the whole neighborhood would burst into laughter, not out of hatred, but because it was the perfect story of arrogance crushed by reality. Karen's mud-splattered clip would occasionally be reshared as a digital legacy of the neighborhood, a reminder that self-appointed authority and grand delusions never unearth historical value, only causing people to slip in the muddy reality. Even so, amid all the tragedy and chaos, I decided that I would not let these nuisances dim my passion for nature. I will not let this ruin my beloved garden, I promised myself, my eyes looking toward the future. In my mind, the image of quiet afternoons with coffee, gazing upon a lush garden, remained indelibly imprinted. But now, every step into my garden recalled the bitter lesson. One's private space is sacred and must not be violated. I will restore my garden, turning it into a place full of life and peace, while leaving behind a sarcastic reminder of that absurd excavation, a lesson that, although Karen tried to protect a relic, ultimately only proved that her arrogance had no footing. Everything may have passed, but in my heart, the image of a bewildered Karen amidst the mud, laughter, and ridicule still echoes like an indelible memory. And I know that every time I recall it, I grow stronger and more confident in defending my own living space against those who believe they have the right to interfere in other people's private lives. In the days that followed, I began to clean up my garden. Every time I saw a patch of soil, a tree stump, I remembered those chaotic yet meaningful moments, a lesson in fairness and the importance of defending the private values we cherish. Before fully restoring my garden, I even carved a sarcastic message on a small sign: "Ancient relic, broken pipe, excavated by the HOA archaeologist." That saying was not only a reminder for those who witnessed the incident, but also a warning to all those who are self-important and claim to be experts in life. Finally, when everything was over, I sat on the wicker chair on my porch, sipping a hot cup of coffee as I enjoyed the sunset that bathed my newly restored garden in a golden glow. I no longer felt anger. Instead, I carried a gentle smile, mixed with a touch of irony as I thought about the livestream clip of Karen, remixed into hilarious memes. In my heart, the lesson was clear. Never let arrogance and self-importance blind reason, because in the end, truth and justice will speak for themselves. If you like crazy stories like this, please like, comment, and subscribe to the Crazy Neighbor Drama channel so you don't miss any tear-inducing, laugh-out-loud moments.